My name is Bonita Cade, and I'm presenting the pedagogical and demographic considerations for teaching multicultural psychology. Please note that the context of my considerations of this topic is the United States of America, which has its own notable history of development in terms of being a highly racialized multicultural society. Similarly, the hegemony relevant to areas of diversity beyond this particular setting will also reflect the unique history and development. So I encourage you, if you are not from the United States of America, to consider that. The examination of systemic racial disparities remains a critical area of research across multiple disciplines, including education and psychology. A growing body of literature highlights the prevalence of racial privilege and microaggressions in academia and professional settings. Particularly, what is underscored is the impact on marginalized communities. Scholars have explored how these forms of discrimination contribute to stress, feelings of alienation, and negative mental health outcomes, particularly among faculty and students from unrepresented populations and backgrounds. Within higher education, racial microaggressions serve as a persistent barrier to inclusivity, affecting both faculty and students. Additionally, faculty of color at predominantly white institutions, PWIs, often face unique challenges when teaching multicultural psychology. Some research has found that African American faculty experience racial microaggressions from both colleagues and students, such as being questioned about their qualifications or facing skepticism when discussing racial issues. These challenges can undermine the authority in the classroom and lead to emotional labor that white faculty members teaching the same subject may not encounter. As a result, faculty of color may need institutional support, mentorship, and advocacy to navigate these difficulties while maintaining their effectiveness as educators. Teaching multicultural psychology requires careful pedagogical strategies and demographic awareness to effectively engage students in critical discussions about race, privilege, and systemic inequality. Research highlights that both instructional methods and the racial composition of faculty and students significantly shape classroom dynamics and learning outcomes. However, teaching multicultural psychology at predominantly white institutions presents unique challenges, including student resistance, faculty marginalization, and institutional barriers that complicate efforts to foster meaningful learning engagement. One of the central difficulties in teaching multicultural psychology at PWIs is addressing white privilege and racial identity development in a setting where many students have limited exposure to diverse perspectives. White students may struggle to recognize the unearned advantages they receive due to their racial identity, leading to defensive reactions such as denial, guilt, and anger. These reactions have become known as white fragility. These emotional responses can have a chilling effect on classroom discussions. These responses can also create resistance to learning about racial inequality. Effective pedagogy in these settings should therefore incorporate some of the following: exposure to non threatening materials before exposure to more threatening materials, exposure to historical facts that have been purposely omitted to support and promote the dominant narrative. The use of materials that allow for psychological distancing and feeling safe, and the gradual introduction of material that leads to discomfort. Activities that are designed to develop an appreciation for the subjective experiences of those who are considered to be the other. The use of materials that result in a recognition of commonalities that people share. Structured dialogue. Self-reflective exercises. Experiential learning to encourage openness and to reduce defensiveness. The instructor should consider the existing and obvious intersecting identities, of themselves, as well as their students based on demographic data as they plan their approach. The question of the lens or frame from which the student views themselves should be considered. Often, an initial presentation and self-reflective assignment in the early part of the term or semester is useful for preparing the student for what is to follow. This can be introduced by materials designed to have the students explore their unique experience by doing, say, a cultural sketch and reflecting on the implications of that cultural sketch. The frame used by the students will affect the credibility of the instructor from the student's perspective, as well as the readiness of the students to meet the challenges involved in learning about privileges granted at the societal level. An informal evaluation of these issues will help the individual instructor determine just how to choose which teaching techniques to employ. One goal of the instructor is to increase the likelihood that class discussions can be optimally uninhibited and productive. For instance, a class that is an elective whose majors are related to the topic may benefit from lectures and a challenging textbook that addresses issues frankly and forthrightly from a variety of scholarly perspectives. When this is not the case, students' defensiveness and resistance can be counterproductive, and their ability to digest the didactic material is impaired. A few years ago, my colleagues and I requested that students in several general education courses respond to the question, "What does it mean to be white in America?" in their initial class session. Responses were analyzed using a qualitative method, and themes did emerge. The responses were illustrative of examples of resistance and possible defensiveness related to the existence of white privilege, as well as a weariness of being made to feel guilty. After the instructor has considered the impact of student and instructor identities as they relate to actual and perceived areas of privilege, the instructor makes a determination of the level of openness to challenge in a given class. There are a variety of pedagogical techniques that can be considered in terms of their fit in this particular situation. In a situation that is determined to be highly resistant, it is effective to increase the student's knowledge base without triggering defensiveness and other negative personal responses. It is also important to recognize that students are unlikely to have been exposed to factual information regarding societal oppression of various groups through laws, sanctioned behaviors, and other examples of institutionalized isms. Therefore, documentary films, entertainment films, and brief current videos are usually very non-threatening and can provide a wealth of factual information and perspectives. I, of course, am most familiar with films that focus on ethnic and religious oppression in the United States, but I'm sure these types of resources are available elsewhere. An example of a film developed for entertainment, which also allows for the exploration of implicit bias, is the film Crash, featuring the actress Sandra Bullock and others. Thus, films and subsequent student-driven discussions are an effective technique for teaching factual reality regarding the development of privileges and how they operate to a highly resistant audience. Another effective technique for teaching resistant, naive, or sheltered students, if you will, is to engage them in experiential activities. These activities expose the student to the possibility that there is a potential to experience a very different reality depending on who you are and how the world sees you. Frequently, the resistant learner adamantly denies this possibility because they have no reason to acknowledge it. It is the minority group member who has an investment in understanding the dominant culture and the dominant perspective because for them, it is a matter of survival. The reverse is not the case. For example, white male students. They have no incentive to learn about white male privilege or the perspective of non-white heterosexual males. Another pedagogical technique for increasing receptivity to learning about privilege is having students see examples of role reversals, which can lead to the recognition that a role does indeed exist. This can be accomplished through viewing films such as those based on Jane Elliott's work, the reality series Black, White, the classic film White Man's Burden with Harry Belafonte and John Travolta, and other films. Again, country and culturally contextualized films will facilitate a student's acceptance. There are also a number of experiential activities designed to help the participant experience of being locked into a role that limits their functioning. That is the experience for many minoritized persons that is not for others, members of the dominant society. When the learner is considered by the instructor to be open to accepting the reality that people may experience the benefits of society differently because of who they are and what they are exposed to, as opposed to their ability and what they do, the next step is having the students read the subjective writings of people whose realities are different. Social media and other resources can be located that include people sharing stories in person and in a variety of situations. Encouraging students to locate these resources on their own strengthens student engagement and investment in the learning process, which is always a positive thing. There are a number of collections of personal writings where, for instance, the writer speaks to life from the perspective of being in a wheelchair. First-person narratives are dramatically poignant to help the development of an understanding of privileges and how they operate in daily lives. When the learner has developed an appreciation of the deprivation, frustration, anger, and reality of being in a non-dominant group, they can consider the important and necessary corollary, which is, what are the benefits of privilege for the privileged, and which privileges do these learners enjoy? This can be threatening if addressed too soon. It can be denied and therefore result in the absence of intellectual growth. Although classroom discussions can result in student growth, positive modeling, and intellectual investment, not all students are amenable to these activities. Students are often very concerned with how will other people see me if I say what is on my mind or if I question. And particularly in the United States of America, students are much more concerned about being seen or called racist than actually being racist. Thus, the additional technique of journaling provides an opportunity for the student to address issues of the benefit and development of their own privileges, the application of learning to their individual realities and history, their choices regarding their future responsibility and commitment. Journaling can provide an opportunity for the instructor to ask challenging questions and for the student to be secure in the privacy of soul-searching responses and answers. This opportunity for personal reflection can be done online, by hard copy, or even on a regular basis throughout the period of the semester or at the end. This is a means for both the instructor and the student to assess their personal progress. The overarching pedagogical approach in teaching should consider some of these as the issues that follow. Meeting the students where they are and developing strategies that allow them to traverse the materials that are less personally threatening to information that challenges the very core of their worldview. Correcting previously learned material that may have well involved historical misinformation. Learning about the existence and the impact of the dominant hegemony, such as whiteness or white as a race, that may have been previously invisible to the student. Providing an optimal environment for a variety of learning styles. Considering the impact on the learning environment of aspects or characteristics of the student, the teacher, the institution, and the impact of the content of the material. By considering these effective teaching strategies, multicultural education programs, we can facilitate student engagement. We can provide a teaching environment whereby students can learn to recognize systemic and personal devaluation of the other. It is after this has occurred that our students can be expected to engage in the challenges and the obligations to act as caring and respectful citizens in a world of diversity. I thank you for your time and attention. I can be reached via email to provide any resources and to continue the dialogue at Roger Williams University in Bristol, Rhode Island, in the United States of America. Again, I thank you and have a good day.